While you were reading articles about how AI agents might someday automate work, Cisco just finished rolling out personal AI agents to 90,000 employees. And that deadline was last week. Not a pilot program, not a demo for investors, actual deployed systems routing tasks and making decisions across one of the largest tech companies on the planet. At the same time, a lending platform called Abrigo announced their agentic platform experience for mortgage and loan workflows, going live this quarter. And Akaneo launched something called Agentic Ziggy on July 8th, which coordinates specialist agents to check data quality without a human opening a spreadsheet. All of this happened in the last 2 weeks. So what even is agentic AI? Because that term's been floating around for a while, and most explanations make it sound like science fiction. The simplest way I can put it, instead of you asking an AI a question and getting an answer back, agentic systems go do things. They're given a goal. Approve this loan application. Optimize this supply chain route. Coordinate these 3 specialist models. And they figure out the steps, execute them, check if it worked, and adjust if it didn't. You're not prompting them every 5 seconds. They're running workflows end to end while you're asleep or in a meeting, which is why the comparison to previous automation waves doesn't quite capture what's happening here. Now for the number that should keep you up at night if you're running a company or trying to figure out where your industry's headed. 79% of enterprises have adopted AI agents in some form as of this year, but only 11%, 1 in 9, are actually running them in production. That's not a typo. 4 out of 5 companies are experimenting, building proofs of concept, running internal pilots, but fewer than 1 in 9 have crossed the line into letting these systems handle real customer-facing work or mission-critical operations. That gap tells you more about the current moment than any hype cycle chart, because it means we're in the narrow window where competitive advantage is being decided right now, not in 2030. What does production deployment actually look like? Abrigo's platform for lending workflows means when you apply for a business loan or a mortgage in Q3 of this year, there's a decent chance an agent, not a person with that job title, an AI agent, is pulling your credit data, cross-referencing income statements, flagging inconsistencies, and routing edge cases to a human reviewer. Akaneo Ziggy orchestrates specialist agents that each handle one piece of product data modeling or quality checks, passing work between them like a relay team. It's not one mega brain trying to do everything. It's a bunch of task-specific models coordinated by a layer that decides who does what and when, which is architecturally closer to how companies actually operate than the single chatbot approach most people imagine. Every automation wave gets compared to the last one. This is just the next industrial revolution. It's like when spreadsheets replaced ledger books, whatever. But the pace here is genuinely different, and I don't think we've wrapped our heads around it yet. Previous automation took entire industries decades to roll out and required massive capital expenditure on physical infrastructure. You couldn't automate a factory floor in 8 months. Agentic AI deployments are seeing median payback periods of 8.3 months from go live to cost recovery, and enterprise deployments surged 466.7% year over year. Not 46%, 466. That's not a gradual transition, that's a land grab, and it's happening while most people are still debating whether AI is overhyped. And almost nobody outside tech policy circles and enterprise software conferences noticed this happening, which is part of why I wanted to make this video. ICML 2026, one of the biggest machine learning conferences, just wrapped up in Seoul earlier this month, with a record 23,918 submissions and an unusually heavy focus on agentic AI in the workshop program. Pinecone launched something called Nexus Engine on July 18th, 4 days ago as I'm recording this, specifically designed to compile business context for agents, so they're not starting from zero every time they're spun up. EY's internal rollout across tens of thousands of consultants reportedly lifted software development productivity by 70%. These aren't press releases about what might happen in 5 years. These are deployment reports from last week. If you're wondering whether this is actually economically viable or just venture funded science experiments, the ROI data is starting to come in, and it's kind of hard to ignore. Successfully deployed agents, so the 11% that made it to production, are delivering an average return on investment of 171% globally. And that jumps to 192% in the United States. Median payback period, again, 8.3 months. For context, most enterprise software projects are considered successful if they pay for themselves in 2 to 3 years. 8 months means by the time your company finishes debating whether to adopt this stuff, your competitor, who moved 6 months ago, is already ROI positive and reinvesting that margin into the next deployment wave. The compounding effect of that head start is brutal. Now, before this turns into a hype video, Gartner's 2026 hype cycle literally places Agentic AI at the peak of inflated expectations, which is the phase right before the trough of disillusionment. So we should probably talk about what's actually hard here. That 79 to 11% gap exists for real reasons. Agents hallucinate. They make confident-sounding mistakes. They're expensive to run at scale if you're not doing model routing like Cisco. And they require a level of infrastructure maturity most companies don't have yet. The fact that 80% of enterprise applications shipped in Q1 2026 embed at least one AI agent, up from 33% in 2024, doesn't mean all those agents work well. Some are just rebranded chatbots with agentic in the marketing copy. But that's also why the 11% who figured out production deployment have such a decisive advantage right now. So what does that gap tell us about who wins here? The companies closing it aren't the ones with the flashiest demos or the most cautious risk committees. They're the ones who've built the operational muscle to move from prototype to production without breaking things. That's less sexy than talking about AGI timelines, but it's where actual competitive moats are being dug right now. The other thing the gap reveals, 60% of organizations expect to deploy AI agents within the next 2 years, which researchers are calling the most aggressive adoption curve among all emerging technologies. If you're in the 79% experimenting, but not the 11% deploying, you've got maybe 18 months before that adoption curve flattens and being early stops mattering. After that, it's table stakes, not an edge. All right, so what do you actually do with this information if you're not a CTO? 2 daily habits, and I'm trying to make these concrete instead of abstract future of work advice. First, start learning to work alongside agents right now, even if your company hasn't deployed them yet. That doesn't mean taking a prompt engineering course. It means using agentic tools in your actual workflow and noticing where they break, where they're useful, where you still have to step in. If you're in finance, play with agent-based data analysis tools. If you're in operations, test workflow automation agents. The skill isn't knowing how to build them. It's knowing when to trust them, when to override them, and how to structure work so they handle the repetitive parts while you focus on judgment calls and edge cases. That tactile experience is what separates people who get displaced from people who get amplified. Second habit, spend time every day building the kind of judgment AI can't replicate yet. And I say yet because I don't know what that list looks like in 5 years, but I know what it looks like today. That means working on problems where the goal itself is ambiguous, where you're balancing competing priorities that don't have a clean optimization function, where ethical trade-offs matter, where you're synthesizing information from wildly different domains. Agents are phenomenal at well-defined tasks with clear success metrics. They're still pretty bad at figuring out what the task should be in the first place, or noticing when the task that was defined 6 months ago is now the wrong task because the context shifted. If you're spending 8 hours a day on work an agent could do with clear instructions, that's a clock ticking. If you're spending 8 hours a day on work that requires redefining the instructions, you're probably fine. Last thought, and this goes back to why the 79 to 11% gap matters so much. The next 18 months are probably more consequential for your career and your company than the next decade. because this is the window where positions get locked in. Once agentic AI moves from competitive advantage to baseline expectation, the companies and people who figured it out early will have compounding leads that are really hard to catch. And once the 60% planning to deploy in the next 2 years actually do, the learning curve flattens and everyone's dealing with the same tools. That might sound like hype, but when enterprise deployments are up 466% year over year and payback periods are 8 months, it's just math. Anyway, if you got something out of this, hitting like helps more than you'd think, and subscribe if you want more of these. I'll be tracking how this plays out in real time.